Hello, hello, hello. How is everyone doing today? Thank you so much for joining us today on Her Version, a podcast dedicated to sharing stories of struggle and triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. If you are new to this podcast, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, and share. Today, we have an amazing guest speaker with us. Her name is Lisa McCourt. Lisa is the creator of the Joy School and believes in our everlasting capacity to create bliss for ourselves. She is an author of over 40 books for adults and children, specializing in the field of personal transformation, and she has shared her joy trainings on stages around the world. Welcome.
Thank you, girlfriend. I'm so happy to know you. Powerful difference in this world, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today. As you know, this platform is very, very special to me, and I'm doing my best to search through all the females in my life and find ones that are willing to come on and share inspiring thoughts to help us think differently than the way that we're thinking now.
That's the trick, isn't it?
Exactly. So when I first met you, you were such a ball of joy. And it was so funny because I saw you before I knew what you were doing, obviously. And I was just like, man, this woman has like something. She has something. And then once you kind of explained, everything that you're doing in the community and within your universe, I just had to bring you on here. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So where does your drive come from? Where or how did this whole thing of like needing to spread joy, where does this come from?
Where did you get the idea that a teacher of joy is an actual job?
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
I love that question. I mean, what I teach is personal growth, how to raise vibration, elevate consciousness, align with that inner wisdom that we all have. But the result of that, the inevitable conclusion, I just always felt there's no other word for it than joy, right? I was interviewed on this radio show a couple of nights ago where they were kind of hip, and he said, like, I'm glad joy is cool again. And I was like, I don't know if joy is or ever was cool. I really don't. I'm not especially cool, but I know that joy is what we're all after 24/7, whether we recognize it or not. Every decision we make, every desire we have, everything we decide to go after, we wouldn't want that thing if not for us perceiving at least that it's going to make us feel good, get us more joy. I always say that I'm here pre-programmed as joy-seeking missiles. And then throughout our lives, we get all this misinformation. We're taught this paradigm that is just completely upside down on its head. We're taught that our joy is contingent upon all these external factors that are going to bring us joy. And of course, it's an inside job. And of course, all these external things that we think we want just become moving targets, right? Because nothing out there can ever really make us happy. So I always say at Joy School, we travel two parallel paths. One is learning the art of joy, which none of us have ever learned, right? And then distinct from that, but also good, is deciding what we want and going and getting it, because our desires are what make a human life. That's what move us forward. That's what keeps things juicy and exciting and interesting. So it's not like we don't want to pay attention to our external circumstances. We just have to keep them in their swim lanes because we think that this stuff is going to get us the happiness, and it's actually the other way around. Once we raise our vibe and learn happiness over here, all of this just falls into place like nothing, dominoes.
Yes. Oh, that totally makes sense.
I thought it would. I thought you would. I sense your vibe.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, they are two completely different lanes. Wow, that's interesting to put it that way. And I feel like everyone does that, where they kind of smush them together.
Oh yeah, all our effort and energy goes after whatever we've decided is going to be the next thing to make us happy. no matter what category of our lives, our relationships, careers, money, finances, spiritual growth, everything is about like going after that feeling, but it's never really the thing that we want. It's whatever feeling we're ascribing to it. And that comes down to some flavor of joy. We all have different flavors that are our favorite flavors of joy, and that changes throughout our lives too. Sometimes we're looking for that high vibe, raise the roof joy. And other times it's more about that zen, quiet, blissful inner peace. But it's always why we make our decisions and why we go after the things that we think we want.
Yes, 100%. So on this podcast, I love speaking about transformation. Looking at you now and the vibrations that you give off, it's hard to believe you are anything other than, but I'm going to ask anyways. What are the two biggest differences between who you are now, who I'm seeing now, and who you were like 15 years ago?
Only two?
15.
No, I mean, only two differences?
Oh. Okay, yes.
I mean, I guess 15 years ago, I was established on my path. So, the differences would be more pronounced beyond 15 years. But still, 15 years ago, I knew intellectually a lot of the concepts that I teach today, but I have this fancy word in Joy School. I call it the kerclunk. And it's when this idea, this psychological concept or personal growth concept that we've, maybe intellectually embraced and we get it and we teach it and talk about it and we're this is what makes sense to me. There's a difference between knowing it and having it kerclunk in your heart. And once it kerclunks, you're changed and you can never go back. It's when it just becomes the default way that you live your life. So I would say 15 years ago, I knew a lot of the things that I know now. I've learned a lot more things in the 15 years to supplement those basic truths and shore them up. But I think I've unlayered a lot because all of us have this aspect of us that is so clear and wise. And it's just the essence of joy and peace and love. And that's who all of us are at our core. Every single one of us comes standard with the human package, but we get all this crap layered on top of it just by virtue of the society we live in. It's just how we create humans right now at this point in the evolution of humanity. We get all these beliefs and things layered on top of it. And, my work with people in Joy School is to unlayer. And so certainly in my journey in the last 15 years, it's been about a lot of removing those layers so that my natural essence could take the lead.
Got it. When did you, or how did you decide it was going to be joy?
The word joy. Yeah, I'm a logophile. I love words. I've used the word love in my business names at different times over the years. And I think that joy is different from happiness in that happiness is one of the emotions that we feel on, in the cycle of perfectly natural, normal human emotions that we're here to feel. Mm-hmm. And at Joy School, we embrace every emotion. Every one of them is good and natural. And I feel like happiness is one of them. But we couldn't really sustain happy 24/7. That wouldn't really be natural to our humanness. But we can have a baseline of joy while we're feeling sadness, while we're feeling anger. We can still have that underlying joy because learning to stop resisting and pushing against our negative emotions, learning to just allow them and embrace them and have them fully flow through us, that is in itself perceptibly joyful. So to me, joy is more all-encompassing and broad than happiness or even love, which is another term that I've used a lot in the past.
That makes sense. 100%. What about, we're obviously in this arena as far as personal development. In your opinion, why do you think people hesitate to develop their mindset further?
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think there's so much misperception about what personal development is. I almost hesitate to use that term sometimes. It's really scary to a lot of people. And most humans walking the planet right now have some level of unworthiness going on, of not enoughness. So on one side, on one hand, they think that it's, maybe they're not worthy of personal growth. It just isn't something that they should put their time and attention into. And then the other side of that is that a lot of programs actually position it this way too, that it's about making yourself better because we need to get better for others and we need to get better for the world. And that just doesn't sound joyful. And that's not at all the angle that we focus on at Joy School. I always promise my students that this is for them so that they can know the inherent joy that is their birthright. And I think if more people understood what's in it for them, that it's not about looking at all the ways that you're wrong in the world and making you right in the world. It's actually the opposite. It's like just looking at these erroneous beliefs you've accumulated so that your rightness can come to the forefront.
100%. I want to ask you, that kind of made me think of something. What is or do you have a viewpoint on this new thing that I'm seeing a lot on social media called toxic positivity? Do you have an opinion on that, as far as like people like us preaching joy, like always be happy, always be joyful? Do you have an opinion on, why that's a thing and what your, I guess, opinion is on it?
We used to call it the New Age bypass. I used to see that term a lot. And I think New Age bypass has sort of come into this toxic positivity. And I think it's, we're all energetic beings. We're all vibrational. We can sense energy. We can sense energy in others. And I think that a lot of seekers have learned some tools, have learned some, modalities, are excited about that. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of easy to want to position that as your identity, maybe before you've like lived it, maybe before it's kerklunked for you. And I don't fault these people at all, but I know that for a lot of those who are kind of watching from the sidelines, that it can feel like a red flag when someone's authentic energy isn't matching the words that they're saying. And it feels like in that case that you're being asked to, I use the expression, paste a smiley face over a cesspool, that like we're being asked to just put on a happy face and positive thoughts, which we have a whole thing on positive thoughts in Joy School. But I think when it doesn't feel authentic, then the naysayers are going to be quick to point and say toxic positivity, when really, I give these people credit because they're trying to step into it. They've learned some of the lingo. They've learned, here's some of the things do. So they're trying it on. They're trying to step into it, and it just is received in a way that feels inauthentic. I think so.
Yes. No, I totally agree with that. And yes, to the you applauding them for coming into it, that's totally 100%, because if they weren't in that realm, then they never would have taken the time to even listen, to know, or to label it as something.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Right? I'm sure when I started teaching this stuff, I hadn't embodied it to the extent that I have now. And I'm sure there are teachers who have embodied it far further than I have, who would look at me and say, oh, she's not quite there. We're all on the spectrum somewhere. And I think who hear some spiritual principle and feel that quickening, right? Because there's like an acknowledgement. You feel the truth of it and you get excited and you want more and you want to spread the gospel of, look what this is saying. And it's new thought, but new thought is really the same thing as ancient spirituality. And that's the same thing as the most cutting edge new revelations in science with quantum physics and how energy works. It's really all the same, but it's like it falls into this big pot of like new thought. And I understand how somebody would like get a glimpse and, oh, I want this. I want to do this. I want to talk about this. And then we spiral. The path isn't a straight line. It's a spiral. We spiral through the material and we kerklunk it to greater and greater degrees.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. And I appreciate that thought process, because I'm going to, not that I was ever harsh or confrontational with anybody, but I'll be able to view comments like that with more warmth, because they are here with us and they are listening to the message. They heard it. So, approaching that with more grace would benefit both sides.
Yeah.
would benefit both sides. That's absolutely true.
Leaders who are going to like take the world by storm. We don't know.
Yes, 100%. So you kind of already touched on this, but what is the difference? What is the actual difference between joy and happiness? Or is there a difference?
Yeah, I think of joy as a baseline. We all have a set point for joy. We all, because of how we really formed our definitions of the world when we're very young, because that's when we form it. That's when we're, primarily in theta brainwave state, the very, very impressionable time when, we get on this planet asking, how is it here? What are things like here? And the information is really overwhelming. And to make it less overwhelming, we create these categorization buckets. Men are this, women are this, love is this, money is this, power is this, rules are this. And whatever impressions we first get from our family of origin, our schools, our teachers, whatever that might be, we tend to very selectively fill those buckets with whatever bits of information correspond to them. We talk a lot about the filter in Joy School. We all, nobody's experiencing objective reality. There's no such thing as objective reality. We're all experiencing the world out there through our distorted perception filters based on these buckets that we set up. So based on that, your beliefs about your place in the world, who you are, we have a set point for joy, just like a thermostat set point or, metabolic set point. And if something were to appear in the world that would significantly up-level our joy, if it doesn't kind of match our buckets, the water that we swim in, we're going to shut it down subconsciously. So joy is a set point that we can actually elevate. We can get cognizant of our habitual thought patterns, cognizant of our bucket beliefs, and by allowing some distance between us and our thoughts, becoming the observer through just some really easy tools that we can apply, we can raise our set point for joy. So again, happiness I see as something that we all want happy moments. We should have as many happy moments as we can, but we can find joy in all the moments. We can, it's more of a all-encompassing baseline, I think.
Got it. I understand that 100%. You mentioned, which I feel like I understand, but I would appreciate if you were to break it down for a second. Yeah. No one has objective reality.
Yeah, totally.
What does that mean?
I'm going to use Joe Dispenza's numbers. I've seen a lot of different numbers, but I like to go to Joe as my science guy. We have 400 billion bits of perception available to us in any given moment. Every second, there's 400 billion bits. And our conscious awareness allows 2,000 bits of information through to land in our brains, our awareness, our consciousness. So how are those 2,000 bits selected? It's whatever we've already kind of assumed about the world. We have a built-in confirmation bias, which is just the tendency to selectively listen to, pay attention to information that corresponds with what we already believe. We've seen a lot of that in recent years with politics and world events. We have a built-in conformity bias, which is the tendency to want to believe what those around you believe, our families of origin or our friend groups. That's part of our primitive brain not wanting to be ostracized from the tribe. And we have a built-in negativity bias that's also part of our primitive makeup, which means if there are two ways to perceive an event, I'm going to stay safer if I choose the negative way to perceive it. But a lot of that safety is no longer necessary. We kind of stay in that sort of survival mode when most of us are not truly, in any position where our survival is threatened. So those three biases cause us to limit our awareness of the 400 billion bits of information which are available to us, a lot of which might contain opportunities, paths we could go, and people we could meet, conversations we could have that would significantly expand our experience here and up-level our joy. But because none of us is seeing the fullness of objective reality, we're only seeing through our distorted filter, we miss it.
Got it. 100%. So are you, and I agree with you, but did you say that humans in general tend to see things on the negative side for survival?
Yeah.
Okay.
back to like caveman days. Like if you saw the tall grass moving, it could just be a rogue wind. It might be a predator. It would behoove you to assume the latter so that you could run. If the red berries might look delicious, but if you had red berries that killed your cave mate last week, you're going to avoid all red berries. So it's just sort of like an instinctive, if there's two ways to perceive this, my boyfriend said XYZ at the party, he might have just been thinking about whatever, or he might not love me anymore. You're going to assume the latter because that's how we protect ourselves.
Yeah.
It's not really learned. Well, some of us have it learned from our families of origin, but I think it's kind of innate, but it can be unlayered and unprogrammed because usually it doesn't serve us to assume the worst.
Wow. So what about, not to say that I am programmed differently, because I'm sure that I'm not, but what about individuals who I've always been called naive,
Right.
because labeled as naive, because I always view the positive. So like, do you think such and such is hurting such and such, even though it's almost blatantly obvious that it's a negative? I always am like, no, he probably is viewing it this, like, I find the twist. Where do you think that's taught?
I sense that you've been around the spiritual block, and I think that there's a deep knowing inside you that is what's going to lead you to have a better expanded experience here. So I don't know what your family of origin was like. Sometimes we emulate our family of origin. That could be something that you picked up. Sometimes we so poignantly are aware that we don't want to emulate, that we swing the other way on purpose. So there are a lot of different things, that could create that lens, that viewpoint. But, I think that your inner knowing, you're probably a little more connected to your innate inner knowledge than the average bear. And our inner knowing does allow us to override that safety block that we have.
Got it. That is so interesting. I can tell that you're just filled with so much. You're filled with so much knowledge. So tell us about Joy School, your creation. What is this?
Thank you. One of my clients recently used a phrase that I love, that I've been saying, which is that it's a personal growth boutique. And I like that description because what I do is I offer up what I consider the best and most effective pieces of all the top transformational gurus that I've written for, studied with, and I've done it all in my decades in this realm. So I'm the curator, basically, of this wealth of material, just the guide that takes you through. Joy School is an online forum primarily for now. Live events are on the horizon again, now that that's become more doable to bring that back. I used to have a lot of live events, and I'm hoping to do that again this year. But for now, it's primarily an online forum for learning new ideas, concepts, paradigms that you bring to your daily life to recalibrate that set point for joy. We operate primarily through online circles, small groups, and that's for my joy. I realized that this is the way I most enjoy delivering information. I used to write, I used to blog, I used to create courses that people would go do on their own. And I just realized that that's not bringing me what I need. I know that I can be most effective when I'm in your energy, in your space. I can tailor things to you. I can customize programs for you that I can't do when I'm just wrapping up these pretty parcels and sending them out into the void. I used to like doing that. I don't anymore. So I just shifted up my whole, how I do things, that it's primarily through these small online groups that are always divinely orchestrated and just beautifully supportive for all the members. So that's the biggest thing about Joy School is the circles that I lead. Every first Monday of the month, I have a free online joy party where I invite some of my favorite guest speakers and gurus and teachers to co-host with me. So your audience is more than welcome to join us. June 7th, we'll have Scott Stabile, who wrote Big Love, who is just absolutely, you will die. He's so yummy. He's just this like heartfelt sweetheart. And all of my guests are extraordinary. So come June 7th, 7 p.m. It's a free event. And that's all we're really doing right now. I hope to get more on the calendar soon.
June 7th?
Yeah.
Is this a Zoom call or what is it?
It's a Zoom.
And how do we get the link?
You can go to my website, the tab that says offerings, it's a little registration button, and it's all free.
Very cool. Very cool. I love that. I was going to ask, as far as the Joy School goes, do you do, okay, so you said that you enjoy the groups, the circles that you were saying. Do you see a difference between working with a smaller amount of people that can kind of feed off of each other a little bit compared to one-on-ones? What's your view on that?
I do one-on-ones. I offer one-on-ones. Right now, most of my one-on-one clients are also in the circles. I find that we learn from one another. I think that's why I enjoy it more than one-on-ones, is I'm still learning, I'm still growing, we're spiraling, all of us. And to have some really solid concept introduced, which we do every week, and then everybody goes and has home play. We apply it to our lives throughout the week. Mm-hmm. We also meet for group meditations, just to combine that energy. So those are optional other Zoom meetings where we get together and have guided meditation together. But to hear that concept, that modality filtered through the perspective of the different members of the group, just makes it land so much more solidly. Some of my participants have said that their most powerful aha moments have happened when I'm working with another group member, because sometimes you're a little bit shy about, we all have different degrees to which we're comfortable being vulnerable in that kind of situation, but you can use somebody else's brave vulnerability to do your own work. So that's why I just love groups. I find it so effective.
Awesome. Yeah. And I would totally tend to agree with you. And that was one of my frustrations with, COVID happening, was losing that. And as much as we all love Zoom and it's wonderful, it definitely still doesn't have that same connection. And especially, my fiance and I, our love language is physical touch. So to be able to touch and hug and put a hand on someone's shoulder, and having that connection has been lost, for a while. So I totally agree with you.
I was a hugger. I used to have a business called Love Shack, which Joy School evolved from Love Shack. And we would have live events every month. And people would tell me, like, I just come for the hugs, because there was such a juicy vibe of connectivity.
Yes. I remember when I first learned that about myself. It was probably only maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It was frustrating for me because growing up, again, I was labeled as being overly affectionate or flirtatious because of that. And it was deemed as a negative attribute for myself. And that was very frustrating until I kind of came to the realization that it's in me. It's not something that I'm trying to do sexually. It's something that I am doing that's just innate within me that I can't help. That's how I show my love and my appreciation. So learning that was a huge aha moment for me, and being able to live that way on a big level now, instead of, pushing it down has been real awesome for me recently. And that was one of the things that I loved about being in groups, is being able to hold hands and being able to hug and embrace when things like that come to fruition, when people start to realize things about themselves and being able to embrace, on the kerplunk. What is it? The kerplunk.
Yeah.
When that happens, it's just so beautiful. So obviously, you've been in this realm for a very long time. I'm assuming that you have a daily routine of such that you stick by for the most part. What would be some advice that you'd give on a daily routine? A couple little nuggets that you can give us to create more joy in a person's life.
Sure. So I'm a meditator. I used to do TM since my 20s. I've taught TM, but not everybody likes to meditate, and even that word, just a lot of people, I'm not going to do that. So it's not mandatory at all in Joy School that we meditate, though some of us do. One of the things that early on I have the students do, one of the primary skills we need to develop is getting some distance from our thoughts and feelings, because our thoughts come to our minds from those bucket beliefs that we form, which makes a lot of them super unreliable. And thoughts are energetic structures that are real things, but they're very malleable once we learn to take control of them. But first we have to disidentify a little bit, because most of us think that our thoughts, our feelings are who we are. And it's really not. The fact that we can observe them tells us we're something else. And these are just things that are in our lives. So one of the things that I have my students do several times a day, some of them set their watches or phones to have little alarms go off, is just to get quiet, get alone, get peaceful, and ask, sweetheart, what are you feeling? Now, the sweetheart part, I have them use a lot of terms of endearment, and sometimes that's super hard for people initially, calling themselves sweetheart. We have a whole other activity where they develop pet names for themselves to use. But really, why wouldn't we want to show this kind of tenderness with our own precious selves? So several times a day, sweetheart, what are you feeling? And we just allow whatever is there, no judgment of it, no, I should be feeling different, I don't have a right to feel this way. It's just complete allowing of it. And then the next question is, sweetheart, what would you love? What would you love to be feeling right now? What would you love next? And we just don't give ourselves time to ask ourselves that typically. And sometimes it's as easy as open the window and let some fresh air in, go get a glass of water, but that's just one little trick you can do, several times throughout the day to start becoming aware of your feelings. And, from there we go into, okay, what was the thought that brought on the feeling? And, another slightly more advanced technique is just recognizing that every reaction we have is a 3-part process. We think that a thing happens and we feel a reaction to it, when always there's like a barely perceptible middle step that we don't even notice because it goes by in a nanosecond. And it's, thing happens, I have a thought about the thing, I make up a story about it, I give it meaning, and then I have a feeling about it. So a little bit further on, we get very cognizant every time we have a reaction. What was the thing that happened? What was the thought, the story I made up about it? And then what was the feeling that it brought up in me?
Yes.
Those are just 2 little ways to start getting that necessary distance from our thoughts and feelings so that we can crank up that set point.
Yes, absolutely. You, the first thing that you were talking about with the word sweetheart, the moment that you said that, I literally got teary-eyed. I could feel that would be difficult for people, because even in my works that I've done, I feel like that would be difficult for me to say.
It is. It's really hard for a lot of people, and it's so beautiful when they start getting comfortable with it. It's sort of like the old Louise Hay thing where you look at yourself in the mirror and say, I love you. And most people a lot of people have a really hard time with that. So this is, along those lines of like, we need to start showing ourselves the tenderness that we so easily afford others.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I was just listening to something this morning about people who, I talk to myself, like I talk out loud to myself. When my fiance and I first started seeing each other, he was like, are you serious? Are you having a conversation with me, or are you? And I'm like, oh, sorry. I talk to myself. But this YouTube video that I was watching this morning, he was talking about how the things that we say to ourselves sometimes aren't the nicest things. Number one, we're very hard on ourselves. And he said, if you spoke to yourself, or if the words that you say to yourself, if you were saying them to a friend of yours, that friend of yours would not be there any longer. They would no longer be your best friend. And he was talking about how it's so important to make sure that we treat ourselves as if we are our own best friend, because in essence, we are. It's very important to make sure that the words that you're saying to yourself are words that you would actually say to your best friend. And like the hardness that we have of like being too hard on ourselves is sometimes so unnecessary. I loved that. That literally hit me so hard when you said that, sweetheart thing. Because like you do that to your friends. You'll be like, honey, or it's okay, girl. And showing that same amount of grace to yourself sometimes doesn't always happen like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. That was heavy. I could see how that would be difficult for some individuals to get that, and how important it is to do that. I appreciate that. When you and I first started talking, I was talking to you about this platform and this podcast, and I had asked you how comfortable you were sharing your story, sharing your struggles, and the things that might have happened to you in your past. And although you were like, yeah, sure, no problem, I'll share my story or parts of my story, you also mentioned the fact that you don't necessarily like to talk about your story or like to bring up your struggle a whole lot, because you like to live in the vibrations that you are in today. And instead of talking about your past, I really wanted to take some time, if you're open to it, and kind of explain your concept with that. Because in my teachings, in my, working with clients, I find so often that individuals sit in the negativity and the repeating of their story, and it becomes their identity almost. So if you wouldn't mind kind of just repeating what you said to me, because I thought it was so profound.
Absolutely, sure. This is a conclusion that I've come to from being in personal development for so long. There are so many models, as I'm sure you know, and they can be super valuable trainings and courses. I'm not trying to knock them, but even so many psychology models focus on what happened to us to make us be the way we are now. And like you were saying, Sabrina, so many people will cling to that narrative, and it just lets them be a victim of their circumstances. It's not my fault I bought all these issues. Look what happened to me. This is what happened. And even, with coaches and healers, it's a big marketing angle to share your story, show your audience what you've overcome so they can feel like they can overcome things too. And I just don't buy into it. I just don't feel like it's in alignment with what I teach. I was a very unhappy child and young adult. I had horrible anxiety rashes for many years, big painful blisters on my palms and soles of my feet. My teachers thought I was mute. I was like literally incapable of speaking audibly the first few years of school. I couldn't express myself beyond a whisper. I couldn't make marks on paper that were legible. I just couldn't put pressure on the pencil to actually leave more than the faintest mark. They'd have to hold it up to the light to see if I even took the test. And that's how terrified I was to express myself. So were there circumstances that led me to be this child? Of course there were. And I've gone into them in the past many times in my teachings, but I just kind of became aware that I feel like there are two things that can happen that aren't ideal. And one is there's a chance that somebody listening is going to say, oh, I didn't have it that bad, so my issues aren't as valid as hers. This stuff isn't for me. Or on the other hand, there's another listener who's saying, oh, her trauma is nothing compared to my trauma. She's not going to have the tools to help me. And what I know deeply to be true about trauma is we all have trauma of some sort. And even like one very specific incident, let's say a schoolyard bully incident, for example, could leave a crippling long-term emotional scar on one person, and the other kid who had the exact same schoolyard bully incident might forget about it 10 minutes later with no lingering effects whatsoever. So there's so much that goes into our trauma storage, and it all just depends on our sensitivity level, what kinds of belief buckets we had already had set up before whatever XYZ thing happened. So really, I just feel like trauma sharing can become this tangly pissing match that really doesn't serve us in our healing. especially when we're going back to that story again and again. It just keeps it alive. It's breathing energy into something that we could be breathing energy into a much better story. So, to me, we don't need to do that for our healing. If we have stored trauma in our energy system, the thing that Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body, it's still showing up in our lives. We don't have to go back to the origin to deal with it. We can just look for where it's showing up right now. It's demonstrating itself, and we can work on it at that level. We don't really have to go back there.
I totally agree. And it's funny, not funny. It's not funny. It's interesting, the two examples that you used as far as when you share your story, what people could possibly be thinking, because those are literally the two things that I think about when I share my own story.
Yeah.
I think to myself, of individuals who've had it worse than me. So first of all, do I even have a right to share my story? Because my story isn't as bad as other people. And then on the flip side, being able to be there for people because, or what was the other one? The flip was, it's not as bad.
Yeah.
So the same exact thing. So they stay possibly in their story or click away or don't listen because their story isn't as bad as my story, even though they still are in a circumstance where they could use the tools and the techniques that are taught, within our curriculum. And so I so appreciate you saying that, because that literally has me thinking about how we're doing things and, where we can possibly change. Because I talk about my story a lot on my platform. And I use circumstances that I've been through in order to start, strike up conversations with people who relate to it. But I am certain, and I do think about that I am possibly losing, one or the other because of that. And especially dealing with sobriety, that's a big thing, especially in the AA rooms that we pull people from a lot of times. It's a big thing of sharing their story and repeating their story over and over again. And that's one of the things that we try really hard to get away from, is to be stuck in that identity of being an alcoholic. So thank you for explaining that. And it 100% makes sense to me. And I love that you were able to put it in words, because it's something that I've thought about, but I've never really verbalized it out loud. And 100%, I totally agree with you.
I just don't believe that what happened to us is the cause of whatever we're going through. There are so many factors that, it's that filter again, like it's how we perceived what happened to us. So, I think that there are some of us who understand that, but I don't want to take a chance of, people thinking that, well, my circumstance has to match that for me to be justified in from whatever I'm dealing with.
100%. So what are your plans? Where are you going with this Joy School? What's your 7-year plan? Do you have any big things coming up that we can be excited about?
That is such a juicy question. In Joy School, we call this reverse engineering. You do this with your people. Do you know reverse engineering? Mm-hmm. It's where you pick a date out in the future. And like in Circle, we all have to pretend that we're there already, whether it's next week, next month, 10 years, whatever it is. And everything has gone fantastically up till that point. And we pretend we haven't seen each other in that much time. And then we take turns really enthusiastically sharing all that's happened for us since then. It helps to, elevate your own vibe on what you want to create. And it helps the circle to hold that energetic vision for you. So it's a really cool exercise just to get into the feeling of, whatever that thing is that you're creating. So want me to do it reverse engineering style?
Yes.
Okay, let me get into character. Okay.
This is great.
So it's 7 years from now.
Yeah.
Hey, Sabrina, imagine running into you, girl. I haven't seen you in 7 years. Oh my gosh. Let me tell you what's been happening with Joy Schools. You're not going to believe it, okay? So let's see, that must have been like 2021. Remember how Joy School was running those online circles? I think there was one in-person circle back then in 2021 that I was doing out on my back patio, but that was the only live event because COVID, remember? Yeah, crazy times. Luckily, with all that behind us, I was able to start doing my beloved live events again. So in addition to all my online circles, and all of the live ones and the online ones, in addition to that, Joy School has just like blossomed to beyond my wildest dreams. I have these small personal groups that I work with in person and online, and I'm having these super cool events. I have live retreats all the time. I'm bringing in these superstars like I used to do with the Joy parties, back in 2021, but I built up the roster to an even more impressive lineup of speakers and presenters. And we just all love swimming in that delicious energy of these love-based teachings so much together. My space for live events has expanded, and there's always this amazing thing right around the corner that I'm busy planning and promoting. I don't write at all anymore because that was an awesome chapter in my life, but I followed my joy into the next chapter, and it's even more awesome. My tribe has multiplied exponentially. I've just found all these beautiful souls to create community with, and it's just awesome.
I'm so happy for you. Oh my gosh, so exciting.
Isn't that a good tool?
Yes.
And then we're just like a week out, like, what are we going to tell each other next week? And we'll like do a little few minutes of like what we're going to tell each other.
Oh, I love that. Did you feel that?
Yeah, I felt it.
Ah.
I was trying to come up with more things. And like, really, in 7 years, is that all I can come up with is like more and bigger of the same? But it really is, because I love what I got going on right now. So more and bigger of the same is my vision right now.
That's the same here, girl. That's the same here. So we're at the part of the podcast now where I like to kind of shake off the professionalism and ask just a couple just regular everyday questions. I like to call it the lightning round 5. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. First question. Your go-to homemade dinner entree.
Anything prepared by my amazing husband. And he delights me day in and day out. And I never want to know. I like to be surprised because he knows just what I like, and anything that he makes. I'm just so happy I don't do it.
No kidding. How often does he do this?
Oh, every day. I mean, we eat every day. So he's our personal chef. It's one of his creative hobbies.
So cool.
What's your favorite meal that he
cooks? What's your favorite meal that he cooks?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, he does this like Indian dish that I absolutely love. He does like this gorgeous thing with sea bass and asparagus. He likes ethnic cooking. We do some nice Latin kind of Mexican inspired meals. We try to keep it pretty, we're not vegetarians, but we're pretty lean, pretty good clean eaters for the most part. Sometimes not.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. That's so cool. I was not expecting that. That is awesome. Your husband's a good-looking guy, but I wouldn't have like pinned him as being a master chef or anything.
He's a master chef, hobby master chef.
That's awesome. Wow, so cool. What was your favorite music or favorite artist in high school music?
In high school, we're talking early 80s. I was part of the new wave music scene. We were alternative. So it would have been like Echo and the Bunnymen or Tears for Fears or English Beat or Elvis Costello, one of those new wave bands.
Very cool. None of which I have ever heard of.
That category, Flock of Seagulls, Adamant. Trying to think
what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-listen to this, and I'm going to look some of those up because I bet I've heard them. I bet I've heard them, but just don't know, who is actually
You'll jump up if you play that.
That's awesome. If you had the choice on a Saturday, beach or pool?
Beach, duh. Unless it's my pool, I really do love the zen of my pool. I'm not very decisive, am I? I haven't given you like a good answer on a single one of your questions, I don't think. I love the beach, but I also love my pool. No one else's pool would make the cut, but I like the zen of what I have going on out there.
Very cool. What do you have going on?
It's we're at Joy School currently. When I have anything live, it's out there. So we have a big covered area, lots of fans because South Florida, wicked heat. So it's cool. We have mister system to keep it cool, and the Buddhas. And I'm a word nerd. I'm a logophile, as I said. So inside my house is called the Love Shack, and I've got the word love. One of my daughters counted up like 130 places in the house that we have the word love in some artistic way. And out on the patio is Joy School. So the word joy is all over, like big letters of joy and little flower pots of joy and signs of joy. So it's energy. Words create energy. So It's a very joy-filled vibration with the Buddha statue holding the word joy, and it's just cool.
Very cool. Sounds amazing. Yeah, I was going to invite myself, but I'm like, I'm just waiting till she says something.
Absolutely.
What is your favorite city to visit?
Any city where I'm with my favorite people. I'm a happy person. It's about the company. I don't even know. I don't even know if I like cities. I guess I like cities, but I'm really about the company more than where I am. I'm just determined to cheat on every one of your questions, aren't I?
That's okay. A place you must go to before you die.
The joy-filled, happy weddings of both of my beautiful daughters and the birthday parties of my future someday grandkids.
Yes.
Places before I die.
Yes. I love that. Do you think your kids will stay in Florida?
I don't know. I think I'm going to end up following them if they don't, because I'm all about the grandma gig someday. I just see that as like, oh, that's going to be the ultimate gig. I don't know. I don't think they'd go too far. One of my daughters, the one who's up at UF Gainesville, loves the South Carolina area, the mountains. I could see her, possibly being there one day. The other daughter is still figuring out, doesn't know where she wants to be. So.
Yeah, my son, I'm pretty sure I'm going to lose him. He doesn't he's not down with the heat here in Florida. So he has family on his dad's side out in Colorado, Washington, a couple little states here and there. So I have a feeling he's going to end up. He loves skiing. So I tell him, I'm like, just make sure you get a decent place so I can come visit. Hang out.
Absolutely.
Don't be smashing yourself into a one bedroom. Grab a two bedroom. But yeah, he loves the cold. He's not down with the heat down here.
And you think you'll always be here?
Me?
Yeah.
My fiance and I actually have plans to travel. We're doing our darndest to build
up with all the destination questions.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So it's probably on my mind. We're doing our best to build up sober society, and we do one-on-ones. So we actually go to their house. And so I'd like to get to the point where we live smaller in maybe a couple places, but predominantly traveling and living minimalist with a backpack and just kind of, traveling around and helping people get sober and find a new focus and a new way of doing life. So
what a meaningful life.
Yeah. And being able to see places and discover places and new places. And, my fiance is talking about getting an RV. So we'll see. 5-year plan.
Yeah. I like it.
Plan. So last question. I always like to end the podcast with words of advice for my guest speaker. So I have a question for you.
Okay.
I'm going to read it.
Okay.
What advice would you give a 20-year-old female out there that is struggling with her self-confidence and her self-worth right now?
Oh my gosh, a 20-year-old, that's such a good age. When I feel into her, she's just caught up in wanting to prove her worthiness to the world. She's unsure about the rightness of the choices she's made so far. She's stressing a little bit about the choices that still need to be made in her life. So what I want to say to her is, darling, you can't get it wrong. You're just pushing the pieces around a game board. That's all any of us are ever doing here. And it doesn't really matter which way we push them. Enjoy the game. None of it is nearly as important or serious as you think it is. It's just chutes and ladders. You're going to fall down some chutes. You're going to get to climb some ladders. And the trick is to just make the whole game fun, because it's not supposed to be as hard as we make it, and it doesn't have to be.
Exactly. Absolutely. I love that. Any other closing words? Hey, what's your website?
My name, lisamccourt.com, lisamccourt.com. And the link to register for the free joy party is there, June 7th, coming up around the corner. And that happens every first Monday of the month. And you can read about circles, and love to have you at Joy School.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much. And on that note, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining us here on Her Version. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, make sure to reach out to me. And I have my website up at herversion.life. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others. Have an amazing day. Much love. Bye.
Love you, sweetheart.